Okay, guys, so I'm going to do a little video here about Graham Hancock. Um, went to do the live feature. Apparently, you have to request that 24 hours in advance, so maybe next time. Um, so, as you guys may or may not know, Graham Hancock did the uh, docu-series on um, ancient stuff on Netflix. Um, saw this tweet from him on Twitter. Apparently, an academic organization accused him of being racist, which offended me a little bit. But anyway, he says in an open letter, the Society for American Archaeology demanded that Netflix reclassify my docuseries Ancient Apocalypse as science fiction and accused me of promoting dangerous racist thinking. Here's my point-to-point rebuttal. Now, before I go into that, take a look at the society here and just check them out first without looking at Graham Hancock's link. And we'll go to About, Mission and Goals. Purpose: advancing archaeology, preservation, and practice. Mission: our aim, SAA empowers its members to understand humanity's past through ethically based scientific, humanistic investigation to promote preservation of archaeological resources and cultural heritage through support of legislation and education, to create collaboration between the profession and descendant communities, and to assist professional growth. Shared vision: to champion archaeologists in their efforts to advance knowledge of and to protect the past for society, and to build a more ethical, just, and equitable future of the profession. So you can see here they're actually an association like NRA ILA or any other industry associations that do direct lobbying. So um, I'm not one of these people that go and trash a group just because they have an organization and they lobby Congress. Actually, it's in the Constitution to be able to petition your government for redress, and of course, First Amendment right to association. So just being around is not bad, but it looks like they're basically lobbyists for American archaeologists. So go back to actually, let's do this. Let's look at their press release. So they put it on their website. SAA sends letter to Netflix concerning Ancient Apocalypse series. Letter to Netflix and ITN, I didn't know there were two, highlights our grave concerns with Ancient Apocalypse, a show that disparages archaeology and archaeologists and aligns with racist ideologies. So I'm not going to comment on any of this. I'm going to let Graham Hancock do it. But if you click on that link, sends letter to Netflix concerning Ancient Apocalypse series, December 1st. Okay, so this is actually a little bit old here. Archaeologists devote their lives and careers to researching and sharing knowledge about the past with the public. Netflix new series, Ancient Apocalypse, undermines trust in their work and aligns with racist ideologies. The SSA's letter to Netflix and ITN production highlights our grave concerns with Ancient Apocalypse, a show that disparages archaeology and archaeologists and aligns with racist ideologies. We have requested Netflix and ITN to remove any labels or state or imply that this series is a factual documentary or docuseries, reclassify the series as science fiction, and to balance the deleterious content in the show with scientifically accurate information about our human past. So that's interesting. So you click on this, we can actually look at their letter. Society for American Archaeology, November 30th. So this was quite a while ago. And it lists a person's name here and their address for the corporate address for Netflix, also ITN. Dear Miss Baharia and Miss Corp, pronounced this name wrong, I apologize. I write this open letter to express the Society for American Archaeology's concern over the series Ancient Apocalypse, hosted by Graham Hancock, produced by ITN Productions. Okay, they're the producer, and aired on Netflix beginning on November 11th. This series publicly disparages archaeologists and devalues the archaeological profession on the basis of false claims and disinformation. I write to encourage you to correctly classify this genre in the show, to provide disclaimers about the unfounded suppositions in the show, and ideally to balance the deleterious content in the show with scientifically accurate information about our human past. The Society for American Archaeology is an international organization. Since its founding in 1934, has been dedicated to research about and interpretation and protection of the archaeological heritage of the Americas. With more than 5,500 members, the SAA represents professional and avocational archaeologists, archaeology students in colleges and universities, and archaeologists working at tribal agencies, museums, government agencies, and the private sector. The SAA has members throughout the United States as well as in many nations around the world. The SAA supports its members' work to understand humanity's past through ethically based scientific and humanistic investigation, to promote preservation of archaeological resources and cultural heritage through support of legislation and education, to create collaboration between the profession and descendant communities, and to assist professional growth. The members of the SAA champion archaeologists in their efforts to advance knowledge and protect the past for society, and to build a more just and equitable future of the profession. The effects of this show run directly counter to the purpose, mission, goals, and vision of SAA. We have three principal concerns with regard to Ancient Apocalypse. The host of the series repeatedly and vigorously dismisses archaeologists and the practice of archaeology with aggressive rhetoric, willfully seeking to cause harm to our membership and our profession in the public eye. Netflix identifies and advertises the series as docuseries, a genre that implies its content is grounded in fact, when the content of the show is based on false claims about archaeologists and archaeology. And 3, the theory it presents has a long-standing association with racist, white supremacist ideologies, does injustice to indigenous peoples, and emboldens extremists. Our efforts to combat pseudo-archaeology are not new. Archaeologists have published extensively on the flaws of unscientific theories and dangers they pose, including several of the recent media interviews, opinion pieces, and social media posts addressing specific content from the show. Popular television series such as Ancient Aliens and on the History Channel have promoted false claims about the ancients past for many years. These claims frequently rob indigenous peoples of credit for their cultural heritage. However, Ancient Apocalypse is more harmful than Ancient Aliens. Wow. It not only disparages the cultures of indigenous people, but also carries the harm a step further by disparaging archaeologists. The combative tone of Graham Hancock damages the public perception of archaeology. After more than a century of professional archaeological investigations, we find no archaeological evidence to support the existence of, quote, advanced global Ice Age civilization of the kind Hancock suggests. Archaeologists have investigated hundreds of Ice Age sites and published the results in rigorously reviewed journals. The assertion that Ancient Apocalypse is factual docuseries or documentary rather than entertainment with ideological goals is preposterous. If there were any credible evidence for a global Ice Age civilization of the kind Hancock suggests, archaeologists would investigate it and report their findings with rigor according to the scientific methods, practices, and theories of our discipline. If the evidence warranted scientific peer review, we would require funding to test it, publish our goals, and promote it in our own outreach materials. Contrary to Hancock's claims, archaeology does not willfully ignore credible evidence, nor does it seek to suppress it in a conspiratorial fashion. Archaeologists devote their careers and their lives to researching and sharing knowledge about the past with the public. When Hancock refers to professionals as so-called experts and accuses them of being patronizing or arrogant, this disparages our public reputation. Our archaeological community is not a monolith, but extremely diverse. Our membership represents a wide range of nationalities, ethnicities, genders, and beliefs. We do not always agree with each other. However, Netflix and ITN Productions are actively assaulting our expert knowledge, fostering distrust of our scientific community, diminishing the credibility of our members in the public eye, and undermining our extensive ongoing efforts at outreach and public education. The assertions Hancock makes have a history of promoting dangerous racist thinking. His claim for an advanced global civilization that existed during the Ice Age was destroyed by comets is not new. This theory has been presented, debated, and refuted for at least 140 years. It dates to the publication of Atlantis, the Antediluvian World, 1882, and Ragnarok, the Age of Ice and Gravel, 1883, by Minnesota Congressman Ignatius Donnelly. This theory steals credit for indigenous accomplishments from indigenous peoples and reinforces white supremacy. From Donnelly to Hancock, proponents of this theory have suggested that white survivors of this advanced civilization were responsible for the cultural heritage of indigenous peoples in the Americas and around the world. However, the narratives on which claims of white saviors are based have been demonstrated to be ones modified by Spanish conquistadors and colonial authorities for their own benefit. These were subsequently used to promote violent white supremacy. Hancock narrative embodies extreme voices that misrepresent archaeological knowledge in order to spread false historical narratives that are overtly misogynistic, chauvinistic, racist, and anti-Semitic. For these reasons, we call upon both Netflix and ITN Productions to remove any labels that state or imply that this series is a factual documentary or docuseries and reclassify this series as science fiction. We urge both Netflix and ITN Productions to add disclaimers to the series that its content is unfounded. We also request that Netflix develop a policy that balances such false narratives with the presentation of scientific documentaries and accurate reporting on the knowledge that archaeologists have generated and continue to generate every day. Thank you, Daniel H. Sandwise, PhD, President. Okay, so basically they're doing what they can to influence Netflix. Whether Netflix will do any of these changes. I mean, ITN certainly is not going to change their tune. They're the company that produced this series. So what we'll do next is go over to Graham Hancock's response. He's got a website, grahamhancock.com. Response by Graham Hancock to the open letter to Netflix dated 30th November 2022 from the Society of American Archaeology, concerned for an 8-part docuseries, Ancient Apocalypse, presented by Graham Hancock. So, back in the day in the 90s in email, you get an argument with someone and you quote their email and respond to it. So he's going to respond point by point here. He has thumbnails to the letter. So, first, the series publicly disparages archaeologists and devalues the archaeological profession on the basis of false claims and disinformation. So he says, well, what claims? What disinformation? Even archaeologists make occasional factual errors in their papers, and I can't exclude the possibility here or there across nearly 30 years of output on the subject that I may have made some honest factual errors, but I've never knowingly made false claims or deliberately spread disinformation and would never do so. I've been outspoken about the many failings of archaeological as an institution, but at no point in Ancient Apocalypse is any individual archaeologist disparaged. With its 30th November letter, however, the SAA seeks to disparage me as an individual, to defame my reputation for honest reporting, and to do harm to me personally. In such a case, it is not enough to simply state, without substantiation, that I have made false claims and spread disinformation about archaeologists. Yet the open letter presents no facts and no substantiation, only the opinion of the SAA, the honesty and, quote, authority of which the SAA seems to assume most be accepted without question or quibble. SAA, I write to encourage you to provide disclaimers about unfounded suppositions in the show. What unfounded suppositions? A statement of authority is no way of substantiation of the slur. The effects of the show run directly counter to the purpose, mission, goals, and vision of the SAA. So a television series should not have been made because the SAA doesn't like its content, and the tens of millions of viewers who have engaged with the series should never have been allowed to see it or make up their own minds about this content. Is it the mission of the SAA to control the narrative about human past, to exclude alternative narratives, and to deny viewers the right to make informed choices? SAA, we have three principal concerns with regard to Ancient Apocalypse. One, the host of the series repeatedly and vigorously dismisses archaeologists, the practice of archaeology, aggressive rhetoric, blah, blah, blah. Since the 1990s, I, Graham Hancock, the host of the series, have been insultingly dismissed and repeatedly attacked by archaeologists using aggressive rhetoric and seeking intentionally to do harm to my reputation, my work, my family, and my work. The SAA's open letter is just one of these more recent examples of this ongoing, highly personalized vendetta. 2, Netflix identifies advertised docuseries. Reply is grounded in the fact the content of the show is based on false claims. What false claims? In what exactly is the content of the Ancient Apocalypse docuseries not grounded in fact? And what false claims about archaeologists and archaeologists is its content based on? The open letter offers no substantiation for these grave defamations, nor any proof that the SAA's own claims about the series are true and grounded in fact. 3, in theory, it presents a long-standing association with racist, white supremacist ideologies, does injustice to indigenous peoples, and emboldens extremists. Now, what I'm about to read to you here is Graham Hancock basically ripping them a new one. This is a spurious attempt to smear by association. My own theory of a lost civilization of the Ice Age and the evidence which that theory is based, presented in Ancient Apocalypse in 2022 and in 8 books over the previous 27 years, is what I take responsibility for. It is nonsense to blame me for the hypotheses of others, either now or in the past, or for how others have reacted to these hypotheses. SAA's popular television series, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to read all this because I just read it. The combative tone of Graham Hancock damages the public's perception of archaeology. Ancient Apocalypse does not in any way disparage the cultures of indigenous peoples. It does, however, claim that the relatively simple technologies that archaeologists attribute to all humans in prehistory are insufficient to explain some key anomalies that the prehistory presents us with, including, but not limited to, ancient, highly sophisticated knowledge of an obscure astronomical phenomenon known as the precession of the equinoxes, the knowledge of how to calculate longitude thousands of years before our own civilization could do so, knowledge of the correct dating to around 11,600 years ago, of the global sea level rise that modern geologists call meltwater pulse 1b, and the chronological implications of the precipitation-induced erosion seen on the Great Sphinx of Giza. I've already addressed the claim that Hancock disparages the public perceptions of archaeology, a claim rooted in the notion that archaeology, unlike other professions, is somehow above challenge, and that the public perception of archaeology should be kept in conformity with the perception of archaeology favored by the SAA. Once again, it seems that SAA's primary motive is to control and monopolize the narrative about the human past. Okay, SAA's claims, assertions, if there were any credible evidence, archaeologists would investigate it and report their findings. Graham Hancock, the archaeologists that have not found material evidence that would convince them of the existence of a lost civilization of the Ice Age is not by any means compelling evidence that no such civilization could have existed. The axiom is old but true that the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, especially so in the case of archaeology, where only limited areas of Earth's surface have ever been subject to archaeological survey at all. The 27 million square kilometers of prime coastal lands that were submerged by rising sea levels at the end of the Ice Age and that are now under as much as 120 meters of water have hardly been surveyed at all, with the bulk of marine archaeology focused on shipwrecks from the historical period and only very recently an interest in the submerged continental shelves inhabited during the Ice Age. The 9 million square kilometers of the Sahara Desert, green and fertile for long periods during the Ice Age, have received only very limited archaeological attention. The roughly 6 million square kilometers of the Amazon that are still hidden under dense canopy rainforests have likewise received minimal archaeological attention until very recently. The massive Ice Age Sunda shelf, of which the Indonesian islands and the Malaysian peninsula are surviving remnants after sea level rise at the end of the Ice Age, has never been benefited from a comprehensive marine archaeological survey. Moreover, as the reaction of the SAA to ancient apocalypse makes clear, archaeologists have already convinced themselves that the very notion of a lost civilization of the Ice Age is preposterous, with the result that no effort is made to mount a targeted search for such a thing, while those outside of the profession who have the temerity to mount searches of their own are labeled as pseudo-scientists and frauds. So to the SAA's reference to which it claims are ideological goals of the series, what are these alleged ideological goals? Absent any clarification, and none is provided in the open letter, is merely another spurious, unsubstantiated slur. Contrary to Hancock's claims, SAA says, archaeology does not willfully ignore credible evidence, nor does it seek to suppress it in a conspiratorial fashion. Graham Hancock: I do not claim that archaeology willfully ignores credible evidence, only that it appoints itself the sole authority on what is or is not credible, and therefore rules out certain evidence that I and others regard as both credible and significant, such as the geology of the Sphinx, or the fact that Plato's date for the submergence of Atlantis, 9,000 years before Solon's visit to Egypt, approximately 9600 BC, is approximately 11,600 years ago, coincides so closely with the date of the meltwater pulse 1b as established by modern geologists. Neither do I claim that archaeology seeks to suppress credible evidence. My claim is that the problem is one of perception within archaeology, where without any, quote, conspiracy involved, unexamined preconceptions and received wisdom about the origins of civilization inevitably bias judgments about the possibility of a lost civilization of the Ice Age. Archaeologists devote their careers and lives. When Hancock refers to professional so-called experts, he's patronizing, arrogant. This disparages our public reputation. Grant Hancock: I have also devoted my career and life to the sharing of knowledge about the past with the public. When archaeologists label me as a pseudoscientist, a liar, quote, racist, quote, fraud, they directly disparage my personal reputation, and as I have already stated, no individual archaeologist was disparaged in the series. My critique is focused on the profession in general and its paradigm of the origins of civilization, which by definition excludes a lost civilization of the Ice Age, and on its potent, near monopolistic influence through the educational system and through media on public perceptions of the past. Our archaeological community is not monolithic, but extremely diverse. Extremely diverse. Our membership represents a wide range of nationalities, ethnicities, and genders and beliefs. Now, when I read this first I was a little taken aback. I don't think that, in making your argument, you should be pointing out, what level of diversity a group has. I mean, that's what the other side does. But he's going to prove that they're hypocrites. So, is American archaeology a shining example of ethnic diversity and inclusiveness? Detailed census data for 2010 to 2019, archaeology demographics and statistics in the U.S. suggest otherwise. And you look at these percentages, that group is like 70% white. It lists the other ethnicities here. So it'd be interesting to compare this. What is the general populations and the percentages in the populations. I don't focus on this stuff, but it'd be interesting to compare that. Ethnicity over time. He lists a graph here. Archeologists race by year. And I know that the other side, they want to improve diversity and stuff. It just, to me, go by the content of your character. So a particular note is okay. I'm not going to read all this. You can look at the graph here. All right, this is what he's saying. Basically, he does some more here. You can go look at this too. Netflix and ITN Productions are actively assaulting our expert knowledge, fostering distrust of our scientific community, diminishing the credibility of our members in the public eye, and undermining our extensive and ongoing efforts at outreach in public education. I repeat that no individual archaeologist was disparaged. There should be no sacred cows, however, when it comes to the criticism of institutions. My critique of archaeology was as an institution is no different from any critique of any large, powerful, influential bureaucracy such as the United Nations or major police force or multinational company. And when I see failings, I have the right as a human being with free speech to call these failings out. Just as I called out the failings of the international aid business in my 1980 book, Lords of Poverty. Moreover, the influence of my perception of archaeology as an institution, even on a platform with the massive outreach of Netflix, is minimal by comparison with the all-pervading influence of archaeology through the education system and through the media on public understanding of the facts from the past. In short, Ancient Alien Apocalypse is an attempt to restore some balance to what has hitherto been a very one-sided debate. Okay, and now they get into the specifics of the assertions of white supremacy. Apparently, I have seen this in some of the other videos. There was a congressman who wrote a book and suggested some of this stuff. I haven't done too much research. I won't really comment. I'll let Graham Hancock speak here. And they claim that subsequently used to promote white supremacy. When was this? 1882? I wouldn't doubt some of this, back then, that it was used by some people, very bad intentions. But let's see what Graham Hancock has to say. There have indeed been suggestions in the past that a comet impact may have been the agency that destroyed a lost civilization of the Ice Age. But neither in Ancient Apocalypse nor my books do I draw upon these prior hypotheses. My work on this matter, The Magicians of the Gods, 2015, America Before, 2019, and Ancient Apocalypse, 2022, is entirely based on the findings of around 100 scientists published in major peer-reviewed journals since 2006 concerning the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, which remains the subject of extremely active and ongoing research, publication, dissertation, and scientific debate. As to the allegations made in the open letter that my work promotes racism and white supremacists, as well as misogyny, chauvinism, and anti-Semitism, it must, presumably, been an inconvenient fact for the SAA that there is not a hint of misogyny, chauvinism, or anti-Semitism in Ancient Apocalypse, and that neither race nor white skin are mentioned in any episode of this series. The SAA is thereby reduced once again to smearing by association and to making thinly veiled accusations that my interest in the possibility of a lost civilization of the Ice Age, most recently explored in Ancient Apocalypse, is in some way inherently racist and white supremacist. Although there is much more to say in refutation, it is sufficient to note here that since I began on this work on this subject more than 30 years ago, the locations I have considered as possible homeland for hypothetical lost civilization of the Ice Age do not include any part of, quote, white Europe, but do include the ancient Americas, the ancient Sunday Shelf, submerged islands around Indonesia, ancient Antarctica, and ancient India. So it is not from Ancient Apocalypse where do SAA's accusations of racism and white supremacism originate. The answer is spin around some of the contents of some of my previous books, in particular my 1995 book, Fingerprints of the Gods, now 28 years old, where I reference several indigenous Native American myths in which white-skinned, bearded gods are portrayed as the bringers of culture and civilization, very often after some great global cataclysm. Since the SAA is accusing me of empowering racism and white supremacism by citing these myths, the issue of whether or not they were tampered with by the Spaniards becomes central. In its open letter, the SAA presents an established fact that the myths were indeed tampered with in Spanish interests, and it's true that growing numbers of archaeologists do believe that. It is not a fact, however, that it is a body of opinion and conjecture, which even today is subject to dispute and disagreement, and which, in the early and mid-1990s, when I researched and wrote Fingerprints of the Gods, was not a prominent view on the subject. Certainly some authorities, for example, Inga Clendenin in 1991, Inga Clendenin, Fierce and Unnatural Cruelty, Cortez and the Conquest of Mexico, Representations, University of California Press, Winter 1991, were very much in the tampered with camp. But in stark contrast, as great many more equally well-qualified scholars had no doubt that the myths collected by early Spanish visitors to Mexico in the decades after the conquest were authentic and untampered with. So when I reported these as authentic indigenous myths in the Fingerprints of the Gods, 1995, I not only did so in good faith, but also I found myself in the good company of, among many others, Jacques Lafay, then professor of the Latin American history of the Sorbonne, Quetzalcoatl and Guadalupe in 1997, Michael D. Coe, then professor of anthropology and curator of the Peabody Museum of Natural History at Yale University in Mexico, 1998, Mexican John Bierhorst, The Mythology of Mexico and Central America, 1990, renowned Mexican anthropologist and historian Miguel Leon Porita, then at the Instituto Indonesia, apologize for massacring these words, Interamericano, Mexican City, The Broken Spears, expanded and updated edition, 1992, David Crosser, the director of the Mesoamerican Archive at Harvard University's Peabody Museum of Archaeology and Ethnology, Quetzalcoatl and the Irony of Empire, 1992, and the historian Hugh Thomas, Conquest of Montezuma, Cortez and the Fall of Old Mexico, 1993. None of these works, or the use within them of myths of returning white saviors, as the SAA typecasts these complex and varied accounts, attracted the least outcry of racism or white supremacists at the time they were published, nor do they now. Neither have there been accusations of racism and white supremacy made against other authorities who have subsequently drawn upon the same corpus of Quetzalcoatl myths that I drew on in Fingerprints of the Gods in 1995. These authorities include Neil Baldwin, Legends of the Plumed Serpent, Biography of a Mexican God, 1998, John Pohl, Aztecs and Conquistadors, the Spanish Invasion and the Collapse of the Aztec Empire in 2005, and Michael Wood, Conquistadors, 2010. Of the greatest significance to the ongoing debate over the authenticity of the indigenous Mesoamerican myths about returning, quote, white savior, again, quote, white savior is the SAA's phrase, not mine, have been two studies in particular. These are the revised edition 2000 with an important new chapter added, David Kores's Quetzalcoatl and the Iron Empire, and H.B. Nicholson's magisterial Toppleton Quetzalcoatl, once future king of Toltecs, 2001, reprinted in 2008 and again in 2015. Although based on his 1957 PhD thesis, which I did not have the opportunity to examine when I was researching Fingerprint of the Gods, Nicholson's Toppleton's Quetzalcoatl strongly reinforces the authority and legitimacy of the same indigenous Mexican myths collected by the Spaniards in the decades after conquest that I drew upon. Yet far from there being an outcry about it, the book has twice been reprinted since 2001 and widely lauded by scholars. As David Carrasco puts it, no one has been able to organize the existing primary sources or interpret them as deeply and clearly as he has, referring to Graham. No one has suppressed Nicholson, and no one will. Or maybe he was referring to Nicholson. It is not necessary to multiply examples here. To state matters briefly, my response to the SAA's accusations of racism and white supremacism is that they are not based on a representative analysis of the content of my work or my general outlook and behavior, but solely on the fact that I cited certain indigenous myths from the Americas that certain scholars think were tampered with by the Spaniards. In Fingerprints of the Gods, I concluded responsibly, in line with consensus of many authorities at the time, that the myths are authentic, and I reported them accordingly. There is further point that needs to be driven home, however. If the myths were not tampered with by the Spaniards, if they are generally indigenous, and as I believed in 1995, and as I still believe today, then even the elastic logic of the SAA cannot stretch to attaching a racist or white supremacist burden on them. On the contrary, it seems to me, and this is the best line, that if any party is guilty of racism and white supremacists here, it is the SAA itself, with its predominantly white membership and its claim to possess superior knowledge of the truth about indigenous myths. Knowledge superior even to that of the indigenous inhabitants of Mexico in the 16th century who shared these myths in the first place. I will close with the comments of David Carcoso on anthropologist Inga Kleinen's attempts to dismiss on the grounds of it is a splendidly implausible web of Spanish fictions, the notions central to the myths that the Aztecs believed Cortez and the white-skinned bearded Spaniards were the returning Quetzalcoatl, and the parallel notion that this belief weakened Montezuma, making him hopelessly indecisive and ultimately leading him to abdicate. Wow. These myths primarily come down to us through the 16th century Florentine Codex of Fray Bernardino de Sagron, who is fluent in Nahuatl, the Aztec language, who worked assiduously with teams of indigenous knowledge keepers to prepare the 12 books of the Codex, and who undoubtedly the most thorough and principled of all Spanish collectors and compilers of the indigenous myths, traditions, and histories of Mexico. Clenenden, however, wants to claim that the myths of returning Quetzalcoatl have no indigenous origin, were entirely concocted by Cortez himself in 1520 to a letter to the King of Spain, and were later picked up by secondhand by Saxon. I have no doubt, right, Coscardo. So this is this guy's writing his thoughts here. He concludes the work of Clenenden and others carries a bloated sense, a transcendent sense that the Spaniards, led by incomparable Cortez, made up the facts of the story while the Indians were merely repeatedly unknowing. The same sense of superior knowledge, of claiming insights that the indigenous inhabitants themselves supposedly did not share, applies to the spin put by the essays on the myths of Quetzalcoatl's return, and I reported in the Fingerprints of the Gods, far from seeking to promote racism and white supremacy. My purpose in that book and all my subsequent work, very much including Ancient Apocalypse, has been to honor indigenous voices and perspectives in ways that the SAA, despite much virtue signaling, does not. Graham Hancock. All right, so what do you guys think about this? Wow, it's like people's reputations and careers are on the line. SAA is very upset, smearing Graham Hancock again. Accusations of racism. You know, when you attribute to someone's motives a bad thing, and you do it over and over and over and over, it's like crying wolf. When someone really does get here, who's really bad and has these white supremacist thoughts, it's going to be harder to defeat them. I can understand like being boisterous and protecting your position. Nothing that I've seen in on Rogan or anything leads me to believe that Hancock is just a journalist, and he says he's only just a journalist, which means he's a writer, and what I believe people should do is defend the truth. And now, institutions like academic institutions should be authoritative. They should use the tools of science, which is measurement, observation, repeatability, peer review. They should do all that. But it seems like in today's world where things are just whack, this is what we got. So do me a favor, guys. If you like this, if you like Graham Hancock, if you like some of the other people, geez, I'm drawing a blank on them right now. But if you like the ancient stuff, do me a favor. Can you share this with your friends? I don't really care about, I mean, it's nice if I get a lot of clicks on this, but really it's the truth that I'm looking for. So until next time, brain out.